We are very, very grateful, and we're even more grateful that Martin Keller, the director of NREL, is here to introduce us and welcome us. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I know we're running a little bit behind already in schedule, but I thought I'm using this to give you a little bit of background. And you might ask, so we as a National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and so why do we talk about climate? And so when I just had the opportunity to talk to some of you folks here, I thought, because I got some talking points, but I just threw all this out right now because I think we have to go a different direction. So I want to start to give you a little bit my personal background, why I am very passionate about what I learned, what you guys want to do there. As you can hear, I'm originally from Germany, and then I spent 10 years in a biotech company in San Diego. And then from there I was 10 years at Voelker National Laboratory, where I oversaw all the biological science and all the climate science, in addition to all the applied research. And then I'm here now at NREL since November last year, so 10 months. So the first question what you might bring up is, so why are we as a renewable energy and energy efficiency laboratory, why do we talk about climate? And of course the point is, well, we're all here because of climate. So I always make the argument, if we wouldn't worry about changing climate, then look what happened over the last 5 years in the US. We have so much natural gas, we don't even know what to do with it, so we have all these coals. So there is no issue from an energy security perspective anymore. All this has completely changed over the last 5-6 years. So, but then, of course, on a daily basis, the change of the environment, a lot of times, you probably here already spend sometimes too much time in Washington. When you go to certain congressional people and you talk about climate change, your survival time in the offices is very short. But as soon as you talk about environmental changes, that's interesting. Because suddenly there's a lot of even agreement in some of the very out there members where they say, well, we have to understand what the environmental changes bring. So, with that, of course, we all know that we're seeing a climate change, and we have to work on this one, how we getting this under control. So I wanted to share a little bit also with you why, again, the element of climate is keeping us very engaged in this perspective. Because what we're doing right now within NREL is we're looking into the long-term projection where NREL will go. So we had an amazing workshop, what we call NREL 2030 to 2050, where we talked about this fundamentally. What will our nation, and I will say globally spoken even, what is needed of in 2050, and what organizations do we need to implement or establish that we can accomplish some of our goals. So, because you can argue, well, where NREL is, and now we have our 40th birthday next year, so you can look back and you all know, look at solar. So the cost of solar has decreased about 96% over the last 5 years. Wind dropped from 40 cents to about 4 cents a kilowatt hour, and we have projections out that it will decrease another 30% by 2030. So the bioenergy cost has dropped significantly. So you can argue, well, why do we need NREL? So we have all the technology, let's declare victory, let's close this laboratory, just rent a couple of spaces in Washington and do policy. So, and of course, me as a scientist, my argument is, no, that's exactly the wrong thing to do. I always make this argument, we're just at the beginning of this green revolution. I always make the comparison about what happened in 1900 when we had people riding around in horse carriages, and what's called this horse parity. And then Henry Ford came along, built his first car, and as you all know, this car had 24 horsepower, so it was about the same speed as a carriage. And so people could argue, well, we reached horse parity, we declare victory, and we don't do any innovation. And now look what happens to our cars. And much more than just bringing us from A to B. They have your entertainment center, they have your video conferencing rooms, and now they will soon drive automatically, they park automatically. We did not stop innovation. And this is exactly what I think we need to do on the green revolution perspective. We're just at the beginning, so why is this important? And this comes back to the workshop. So when we talked about this, what we need to go from NREL's perspective, and we are working on the final report to then also release this publicly, what we call is that we will be very focusing, I think, on this question of deep decarbonization. Why is this important? It comes back to climate. So we need to decarbonize. That's why we need to do this. Which then leads ultimately to a new phrase, and some of you might have heard about this. What I get very excited and fascinated about this, which we call this planetary health. So interesting, for some of you, I don't know how much you follow this whole planetary health discussion. A lot of people jump onto this, but right now it's very interesting because planetary health discussions are all driven out of environmental issues and medical issues. So when you look at some of the sessions they have, nobody talks about energy in planetary health. And from my perspective, so the energy is almost, this is the infection we have in our body, in our planet. And then when you talk about the current discussion about planetary health is trying to give people some ibuprofen to lower the fever, but they're not looking into how you really fight the infection. So what is the antibiotics we need to use to get the infection out of our planet, which is all around energy, linked to climate. So that's what I see as a long-term trend for our laboratory. So then, just perhaps 1 minute or two, and I think you probably are familiar with the issue we have on decarbonization. So when you look at the use of energy across the world, but also in the US, it falls into different categories. So number one is electricity generation. So when you look at the forecasts going out to 2050, 2040, so there's a pretty good potential plan to really decarbonize the sector. We talk about wind, we talk about solar, we need to increase and find better ways to do storage, but there is a path forward to do this. So the last 10% to decarbonize the electrical sector will be very, very hard, but to go down 90%, there's a plan. We can do it. So then let's look at the other sectors. Another big sector, transportation. Transportation falls in two categories. So there is the first 50%, which is commuter traffic, going to work, you're driving around in the city. There's a plan. We know we can electrify, there's hydrogen, there is a path forward. So what about the second 50%? So this is, some of you might have taken a plane here, or ship traffic, or heavy-duty truck traffic on the interstates. To decarbonize this will be really, really hard. The problem is, if we do not decarbonize this second 50%, we know that we will not make our 2-degree goal. So we have to decarbonize this. So how do we do this? What's the plan? Honestly, of course, I'm coming through the biofuels industry into this job here, so this is probably I'm a little bit biased, but at the moment, on a short term, I do not see any other solution to create hydrocarbons except coming through the biofuels industry. That, in my view, 20 years out, there is no other plan. Long term, well, perhaps we can use solar directly to go to hydrocarbons. We can use perhaps a concentrated solar power and use the heat to drive catalysis to hydrocarbons. Perhaps we come up with a smarter way to replace hydrocarbons, but even there is no view out there. There's no vision and there's no plan because at the moment we do not know how to replace hydrocarbons for ships and planes and heavy-duty trucks. We will not fly a plane on batteries and also not on hydrogen. So we need to get our act together and think about this. So this is one area which is hard. So then even a harder area is industry, which all goes down to processing. When you look at the industry, CO2 emissions, some industry, for example concrete, if we do not get carbon capture and storage to work, I do have no idea how we could decarbonize concrete production. Steel, another very big emitter. There is some ideas where you could say, well, can you use some more electricity in steel productions? Some people have a path forward. There could be potential. Another big area is chemical productions, which, well, you can argue, can you completely rework this and bring in, let's say, some new renewable molecules derived from plant materials. So, for example, we have a good program here where we're trying to replace a precursor, acetonitrile, for power production by using plant materials. So there could be a path forward, but this will be very, very hard. So I'm just throwing this out of you because we need to come into this from two sides. I think what I understood from talking to you, what you guys are doing on the climate side, and also to influence policy, what we are trying to do on the technological side to see what are the gaps in these different areas? So for example, in transportation or in industry, what do we need to develop? What methods are we, what new science do we need to bring in to come up with some solutions towards deep decarbonization? And if we miss this, well, then there's no way that we're keeping our 2 degrees goals. And you know, I tell you, this is 3 weeks ago. I was in India, and we had this U.S. delegation. We met with, and it's very concerning when you listen to them. And they have, of course, this big vision to have solar and renewables deployed, but they are far away how we want to do this. So same in China. So we need to work together as a kind of community to try to approach this. I always make this that a CO2 molecule doesn't stop in front of our borders. By definition, the problem is international. Sometimes this is where policy comes in. Our congressional people a lot of times don't understand the problem, and this is also what fascinates me, that over the last 10 years, in my view, science has completely changed. It comes back to how the national labs were created. They were always focused on the national interest. Manhattan Project as an example. And nowadays, what is very science going? What I said, the problems we are facing are by definition international. Because what I said, in we alone, if we just do everything to keep our CO2 emissions low, and China and India and other countries that don't do anything, we will still miss the goal. But this needs a rethinking in Washington and in some of the other countries. And again, this is where policy comes in. I think will be very important. Because it's scientists how we need to attack this problem. No country alone will be able to do this. And this is where I think sometimes the scary part. How do we influence our decision makers in our governments that they understand that international collaboration and research will be extremely important and will increase in importance? Because again, we alone, no country alone will solve this problem. So we need to get the best and the smartest scientists and engineers together to work on these problems as a team. Otherwise, we will miss our goals. So with this, I don't know, perhaps we have some questions before you go back to your program. So if you have any questions, please. Everybody happy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us how you see this knowledge broker role from where you're sitting, because you're coming at this very much from a science kind of lens. Do you think this knowledge broker role in kind of translating that science is, how important is that for an organization like NREL?
So let me, and this goes back to my Oak Ridge days, and I hope and again, German's always outspoken, so sometimes I'm very, very frustrated with our climate scientists. And yes, when you look into this, so it all starts. Listen to the discussion we have in everywhere. So look at the news. So what is the first thing when you have a conversation? You ask them, do you believe in climate change? Well, you believe in God, but you not believe in science. The data are yes or no. So, but for some of the reasons, this whole discussion was pulled, what I call, into a religion. That you believe or you do not believe. Well, there's nothing to believe. You have data suggesting that there is changes, or you don't have the data to support this. So that's one thing which I think we have a problem, how we as scientists started to communicate the change in the environment, climate change. We, I think as scientists, carry some of this issue that it was pulled into a religion, to be honest with you. So number two is, when you talk to climate scientists, and again I'm generalizing, but there is this survival syndrome, and you see this in many other science disciplines. For so many years have the climate scientists lived on this edge, where they were always close to being extinct, because the people just didn't take them serious. So which developed this culture of being ultra conservative and careful. So when I was at Oak Ridge, talked to some of our climate scientists and tried to get a very clear answer, I hardly ever could get a clear answer out of them. Because we're always looking, of course, into models and forecasts, and there's always this uncertainty factor in there. And with this whole discussion is always a little bit vague. And some of the climate critics using exactly this to hit us back in this area. So now coming to the brokerage, I think it will be very, very important that we pulling some of the data together, that we working in CIS to see how we can influence policy. The problem is, which I don't know too much about your organization, but in my view, the most critical point is how can we take some of these discussions out of the space of religion, and it only can be done by hardcore scientific data, in my opinion. And then it takes, I think it takes some time to change it, because honestly, there is found if it's a religion one time, so certain believers or non-believers you will never change. So that's the reason I think we need to work on the next generation, and then having more and more of this data to show scientifically that we have a problem. So, yeah.
Just one quick comment in response to what you just said. You know, there's a fairly simple answer in terms of habits of speech that I think can go a pretty long way to help counter this, you know, religionization of climate science, which is just to say, you know, when you talk about what the consensus is, you say, you know, the scientists are convinced, based on the evidence, that, you know, the climate is warming and whatever, however you want to frame it. So just get in the habit of saying it that way rather than scientists believe.
Correct.
Counter and from
Yeah. Okay, I give you this one example, and I like to tell the story. We were 3 laboratories. This was where some of our Tea Party candidates got elected in Washington, and 3 of our labs, Berkeley, Pina, and myself, we did the round and talked with these guys, and we literally pulled straws who talked about climate change. So I was the lucky one. So I was thinking about this, and this comes back to your point. I said, how do I do this? That I talk about what we're doing and not being thrown out of this office in 5 seconds. So what I look now as a scientist, it crunches my stomach, to be honest, that we have to change the way we're messaging, but well, that's life sometimes. So I made this point where we had this at Voelker, this very interesting research project in Alaska, where we're changing, or where we're looking into 2 different sites, one in Barrow all the way in the north and one in Nome, to see how climate change changed the environmental factors, and all this from shrubs to microbial ecology and all this, everything included. So I walked in this office and talked about the environmental changes, and I showed them some pictures and showed the polygons forming. You all have seen this data, shrub invasions, and then from there I said, look, now we see the environment is changing, and we need to understand how this environment changes, because what if the environment changes in Arkansas and your river doesn't have enough water to fully nuclear power plant? So the guy said, oh my God, this is really important. I congratulate you. Have to continue this research. This is very, very important. So if I would have told him that we're doing this in climate change, again, he wouldn't even listen to me. This comes exactly back to what you said. I think we as scientists, sometimes we need to work how we messaging our research back to some people. Look at it. We still have our farm in Tennessee, and when I look at our neighbors, I mean, look, they don't even know what science really is. So we as scientists need to learn how we communicate with people, and we as scientists need to do a better job in doing this. I always make this experiment here when I'm a microbiologist, and when I look at our material scientists and our solar people, and they have a great paper, and I walk in and they explain to me what it is, I have no clue what they're talking about, because I'm not a material scientist. So I said, okay, good, so now explain this, please, to your grandma. How would you explain to her why the research you have is important? And of course, it's interesting, especially with our postdocs, they sit there and they have this kind of moment, and then they say, okay. And then they try to phrase it differently. And then the rest of the if I understand, then you need to notch up another one to that the general population understands what we are talking about. So I think we, as scientists, are not trained to communicate with regular people. And this sounds snobby, so don't get me wrong there, but I think it's critical to us. We need to do this because we have a problem. And if we don't get the climate and CO2 emissions under control, our Earth will look very, very different for our grandchildren. So we have a mandate to do this. And I think our mandate as scientists is also to explain the work we're doing in a way that everybody can follow us and understand. And this is the reason why I think it comes back to policy. Okay.
Thank you very much.